How are you doing?
Hey, I love you.
How are you?
Hello.
Let's go!
Hello everyone, welcome back to Are You Okay? My name is May, and this is a show about sharing honest conversations, sometimes messy, sometimes insightful, but always authentic. I'll be serving up a slice of chaos and comfort as I navigate my life in my 20s. So whether you're listening while you're commuting, doing your laundry, or just avoiding your responsibilities, I am so glad that you are here. Mabuhay Philippines, I am checking in from the beautiful island of Palawan. I've left the busy streets of Manila for a little getaway in this beautiful island, and it's only been about a week since I made the move, but I have been so blessed with the people and the community and the nature, the beaches. Honestly, I am so grateful to be here, and also, it is the reason why in the background you may hear some chickens crowing or kittens crying, because I woke up the other day and found some kittens on my front door and there's a bunch of chickens outside. I guess it marks the authenticity of life in the Philippines. So yeah, please just bear with us with the background noises, but hopefully you might get a glimpse of what life is like here in the provinces at least. So if you've been listening to our podcasts, you'll know by now that we do something called a weekly recommendation every week. And for my little recommendation, I thought that I would introduce you guys to OPM. And OPM stands for Original Filipino or Pinoy Music. It's such a shame because while there is an understanding that Filipinos are so good at karaoke, we don't seem to find actual Filipino musicians and artists in the big billboards and the charts around the world in global rankings of music. Musicians here are so incredibly talented and they deserve so much more presence and recognition within the global music scene. And I thought this would just be a great way to introduce you guys to two artists that I have in mind. One of them is Four of Spades. If you like anything rock related, there's a lot of bands in the Philippines. Your classic bass, guitar, drums, vocal setup. The Four of Spades has a very long history within Filipino music. Go check out their music and their story. It's really fascinating. But yeah, another one, if you are on the other spectrum of music genres, Glock 9. Glock 9 is a Filipino rapper, and for a while I was tempted to learn his rap simply for the fact of learning Tagalog, but I never got around to it. But Glock 9 is also a good artist, and look, I could spiel on forever. I'm such a music nerd and a fanatic for spreading more awareness about the beauty and the culture of the Philippines, but I will stop there. You guys can venture off after that. But yeah, Filipino music, have a listen. Even if you don't understand the language, it's such a good way to at least introduce yourself to something a little bit different. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy. Let me know what you think of the music that's out there. Alrighty, just before I introduce the episode topic for today, let's just check in with the theme that we have placed for this episode series. We're up to theme 8, which is the online world. So in the last episode 8.1, Ebony and I did a deep dive into what it was like growing up with technology and being a Gen Z and entering the digital age through our schooling, our education, and also in our family lives and beyond. And it was such an interesting conversation, and we had so many reminiscent moments, like talking about our first phones, which both happened to be a Nokia brick phone, and also just discovering how much advancements have taken place in technology and the digital world during our lifetime. And we explored a little bit about generational differences and I guess what's in stake for us and technology in the future. So if you'd like to have a little trip down memory lane and reflect on the digital world and its impact on us, Gen Z, and broader generations, have a listen to our episode 8.1. Now, more broadly speaking, the theme, the online world, covers everything that is to do with the digital age. And for this particular episode, I wanted to tie something that I'm incredibly passionate about, which is mental health advocacy. And I thought, what better topic than talk about the rise of AI and its use in mental health treatment. I recognize this as a very popular discourse within academia. For those who don't know, I study psychology. Whilst psychotherapy and talk therapy and human-to-human contact has been the main way in which we have conducted treatment for mental health, there's been this significant rise of the dependence of AI and its use in therapeutic settings and outside of therapeutic settings in people's homes as well. So it's a point of contention, it's a point of consideration in terms of advancements, and also a very big question mark for the ethics in the use of AI in mental health treatment. But the big caveat, obviously, is that I am no mental health expert. While I am studying psychology, I am a student at the end of the day. I have no qualifications within psychotherapy as of now, but I just wanted to share my thoughts on what it's like, because I feel like the majority of people utilizing AI for mental health treatment has been the youth, and especially young adults and teenagers. So I feel like the generation that I am part of is actually the one that's pushing forward the use of AI in mental health treatment. Something that might resonate with all of us is that mental health exists in everyone. It is such an important thing to think about. And even if you don't know all of the terminology about counseling and psychology and all of that, that's okay. I want to tackle this topic not from my high horse, but more in terms of introducing you to the more academic side of mental health and also practically how it might impact us as well. I will be referencing some scientific journals and nitpicking what is out there in terms of resources. But this is a conversation for you and I. So hopefully it doesn't feel too daunting. If I use technical terms, I'll try and explain them or simplify their meaning so that it feels more of like a welcoming space, because it can feel very daunting to be challenged with all these technical terms. So without further ado, let's jump into our episode for today. So in the first section of this episode, I just wanted to give a brief overview of how technology in general has impacted mental health treatment. I want to explain a little bit about the pros and the cons, mostly from my perspective of someone that has received treatment in the past. So let's dive into a few of the pros. The general statement is that technology assists human practitioners by expanding their therapeutic toolkit. Some of the technological tools that I have used in my own therapeutic journey are things like mood trackers, digital journaling, progress reports, and completing questionnaires. Something that I have relied on heavily during my time in the Philippines is connecting to my practitioners back home in Australia through telehealth or online therapy and consulting sessions. I have a really grounded and solid medical team back in Australia, and I really wanted to maintain the treatment that I received from them whilst I was traveling overseas. And something that I felt so grateful for having the opportunity to do was online therapy. It's such a crazy thing that we can still maintain connection across waters, across countries. It was really interesting because my psychologist actually moved to the UK as well. So it was quite the spread of my medical team being everywhere, but I was so grateful that I was still able to receive treatment from all of them. And even when I was living in Australia, I also used online therapy because sometimes I would be out of town, but I'd still want to maintain our sessions, so I would just call up my doctor and have a telehealth session. Or if I couldn't make it to a session in person due to traffic, due to personal circumstances, I would just send a quick message to my doctor being like, hey, I can't make it today, can you send me the Zoom link? And it really gave me a alternative option to maintain our sessions whilst being flexible with the things that were happening in my life. So I think I would say online therapy has been the greatest gift of technology in mental health, personally. Something else as an internal factor of treatment has been booking systems. With psychologists, if you've ever tried to book a session before with a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you know the wait times are crazy. Just to give you a bit of a backstory, I'm currently doing a volunteer internship with a mental health organization in the Philippines, and I have witnessed how difficult it is to have to come in person to even just register for an appointment, just to book an appointment. And coming in person isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just takes a lot more resources and time and cost for the transport, for the commute, for the waiting time and all of that. And something I feel a lot more grateful about is the fact that I can just book any consultation that I need in an online booking system or just over the phone. I now, from having a small glimpse into the mental health scene in the Philippines, I feel so grateful for having that tool for my sessions back in Australia. Now, I mentioned symptom tracking apps, and something that I wanted to share that has been a really good use of technology in mental health has been for my eating disorder recovery. And back in the day, I remember there being paper handouts of food diaries, and you had to lug them around and remember to write down the things that you ate during a day and what time and how you felt and yada yada. But it was such a time-consuming process, and something that technology helped us with was to create these food tracking apps. One in particular that I used had a feature where I could just take a photo of the food that I ate. And then it was so much easier if I couldn't log specifically at that time, I was super busy, then I would just take a photo, and then at the end of the day, I already had a reference from that photo of what I ate, and I could try and recall kind of the moods or whatever was going on with my day at that time. And then this was actually really helpful because the information that I logged into this diary app went directly to my dietitian, and then during our consultations we would talk about the food diary and kind of unpack the emotions that I was challenged by during those meal experiences. So yeah, that was something that I used in practical terms and have been very grateful for having digitalized versions of tracking systems and apps. Something I briefly wanted to mention is the use of social media. And while there has been a lot of, negative discourse around mental health and social media, there's also been a very positive side of the use of social media in raising more awareness about mental health. For those who have used the platform to advocate ethically and authentically about mental health experiences, it's actually been such a great way to expose people to lived experiences and to different resources regarding mental health treatment. And also, it's been really helpful in destigmatizing mental health in communities that previously were really difficult to reach. Because something that I've noticed being in a country where mental health is highly stigmatized, a lot of rural communities who don't have access or knowledge about mental health resist mental health treatment and psychoeducation. It's really difficult to explain to someone something that they blatantly don't know about, and to walk into a community with this educational mindset of this is the right thing, this is what science says, when there hasn't been a previous understanding of what this is in the first place. For example, in the Philippines, we have a very strong history of healers, and we rely very heavily on spirituality and religion to help us heal and overcome really challenging times. So if you walk into a community where spirituality is very highly regarded, it's really difficult to say, no, but this is what the science says, because it won't be taken seriously. So something that social media has been able to do is take out a bit of that resistance, because the person who is on social media is the one that has agency in what they use that social media for. And sometimes they might come across words around mental health, and that's helped to at least start the conversation and bring awareness to the kinds of words that we use in mental health, such as depression, anxiety, stress, and just bring more awareness to emotional literacy in itself. But just to jump into the cons of technology and mental health, there's also the flip side of social media being used for things like cyberbullying, and also a big boom of misinformation, especially regarding mental health. And something I wanted to talk about is the rise of TikTok therapists. It kind of seems like nowadays everyone can have their own specialization or qualification around, I know what I'm talking about because I did a PhD in this. I know what I'm talking about because I've been an advocate for mental health for 10 plus years. And I'm sure there are people out there that have very valid qualifications, but sometimes it's really hard to distinguish who they are when everyone seems to have all of the answers. And the kind of information that gains popularity online is the ones that are eye-catching, that are super intense, and the most extremist perspectives or points about certain situations. And something that I've realized within mental health is that it's always a spectrum, and there's always so many conclusions and perspectives that we can take in terms of different situations regarding mental health. And so we can't be like, yes, everyone that is depressed will look like this, or everyone now has ADHD. Everything is so complicated and individualized to everyone's situation and needs. So yeah, those overgeneralizing, very enhanced statements that usually trend can bring a lot of misinformation into the digital domain. I've also noticed a trend of people using TikTok to diagnose themselves. And while I feel like it's a very amusing practice to do, it's a little, for a lot of people, it might not be as serious of a thing to do. Like, oh, I have these traits of ADHD. I might have anxiety or perfectionism or something like that. It is so easy for these labels and diagnoses to be misused. And a 3-minute maximum video on TikTok cannot give you the same qualified or valuable advice that someone with years of education and practice can give you across multiple hours of sessions. It's very easy to be like, oh, at face value, I look like I have ADHD, but there is so many complexities, as I said, to mental health. And just, bear in mind, you also might not have ADHD, guys. But if you are serious about it, go check it out. Go outside of TikTok. Go get some help, girl. And just a last con about technology in mental health, it has introduced a greater risk of confidentiality breaches, especially when you are digitalizing records of personal treatment and information out there. So that's just another thing to consider. My apologies, that was such a long ramble about technology in the mental health world. But let's jump now into the AI world, which has been a newer introduction within technology and mental health. And let's just start by trying to understand what exactly AI really is, because I feel like we use that buzzword so often, the AI this, AI that, but we don't really consider what exactly AI is. And I am no artificial intelligence expert. This is just information that I collected from online. This is a definition provided by Britannica. Artificial intelligence is the use of computers and machines to mimic the problem-solving and decision-making abilities of the human mind. It's about creating systems that can perform tasks typically associated with intelligent beings, such as humans. This includes abilities like reasoning, understanding meaning, generalizing, and learning from experiences. Now, there are different types and categories of artificial intelligence, as you might have guessed, but there's 2 distinct categories that I just wanted to explain really quickly. The difference between generative AI and rules-based AI. So rules-based AI is a system that has used pre-programmed decision-making tasks. So if you include a prompt into a chat box that is rule-based, it already has been pre-programmed to give you an answer based off the kind of prompt that you give it. And there's a lot more rigidity in what the AI response can be because it's all pre-programmed. Now, generative AI is kind of the contrary to this, where its response is generated based on the data sets that it's been provided with and uses predictive technology to pretty much guess what kind of response you are looking for. And so generative AI includes things like large language models and also natural language processing, or NLP. It's the foundation of things like ChatGPT, and this is especially important to consider because the main trend of people using AI in mental health treatment has been through chat-based AI programs like ChatGPT. So something to keep in mind when we consider the application of AI in human psychotherapeutic treatment is that AI is simply a text-based computer program. It has, at this point, no emotional or empathetic capabilities. It uses predictive statistics to generate likely responses based on patterns in its training data. So yeah, we just have to keep in mind that at the end of the day, even when sometimes its wording and how it treats us from a face value perspective might feel really human almost or emotional, at the end of the day, it's a computer program. Okay, I'm glad we got that sorted. Now, I'm going to give the smallest research review on what science says about the use of AI and mental health. The anchor paper that we'll be covering today is called AI in Mental Health, a review of technological advancements and ethical issues in psychiatry. And frankly, I could have done like a whole research paper on this topic because I just personally find it so fascinating. But I ran out of time, and I also just had to keep in mind that this is not university. We don't have to be doing research papers in our spare time. But hopefully in the future, I can read up more on other reviews and papers because it's actually just so interesting. I'm a nerd at heart. If you didn't realize, I debuted my glasses. So these are my reading glasses. Yeah. Welcome to my beautiful nerdy world of psychology. So back to the research paper. It's a similar format to what we did before of the pros and the cons. So something that this research paper made pretty clear was that AI is actually found to have pretty positive impacts in the early detection of disorders through analyzing behavior patterns, identifying risk factors, and it has assisted human mental health practitioners in the process of diagnosis through these analyses and identifications of risk factors and such. And this also enhances and speeds up the process for treatment and recovery as well. Now, something of a caveat to make here is that while it has assisted with diagnostic detection, it's important to remember that the diagnoses in itself are always changing. So in psychology, the holy Bible of diagnoses is called the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. This currently is in its 5th edition, and so it is always evolving. And so sometimes it may be difficult for the AI to detect correctly about things that are actually not part of the DSM as of current. An example of which is complex PTSD or CPTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder does exist in the DSM-5, but complex PTSD, which is something that I've actually experienced and has been something that I have received treatment for, is actually not part of the DSM-5. And we could say as of yet, but we also don't know how they are going to evolve the DSM as time goes on. So it's really difficult to say that detection of these mental health treatments are 100% accurate. But also, human detection is not 100% accurate either, but I guess it's a point of consideration because there are limitations to what AI can detect if the data is not updated. Now, another pro of AI in mental health treatment is the personalization of the treatment itself. It can assist us with tailoring medical dosages, iterating therapeutic approaches, and making real-time adjustments based off the patient's unique biological, psychological profile and treatment history, and really trying to optimize treatment outcomes. And finally, I think this is the most significant advancement that AI has provided us, but it is accessibility. While therapists are so great, there is so much limit in terms of financial accessibility, in terms of time accessibility, and so many other factors. But AI is accessible 24/7 and is so much cheaper in comparison to therapy with a mental health professional. It doesn't have to sleep, it doesn't have different moods, it doesn't get sick, and you can access it from the palm of your hand, which is just such a crazy thing to consider. And it also broadens the use and the availability of treatment. But as always, there is a flip side to the story. And this review suggests that there are 3 things to consider that AI could negatively impact in mental health treatment. One, similar to what we addressed before, is privacy and data security. As we said, when we digitalize information, it requires a lot more measures for safeguarding and security because there's a higher risk of that data being accessed by non-authoritative figures. And when we talk about AI specifically, we have to consider the fact that this computer program is now getting direct access to our symptoms, our treatment history, emotional, cognitive, psychological information. There is less understanding and more difficulty in safeguarding information that is fed directly to AI. So this brings up all of the issues around confidentiality, data rights, and regulations around privacy, and all of that fun stuff. Another thing is that it introduces a new type of bias, which is algorithmic bias. And we see this already in what social media feeds us. It only feeds us content that it thinks we are interested in. And so by relying on technology, specifically AI, it can amplify and worsen those biases, and it could make therapeutic decisions really biased towards its understanding of you or its understanding of the data that it contains. And it's just something to consider, because with psychotherapeutic treatment, we want to come in with the maximal point of objective perspective, which is obviously very difficult because we are all humans at the end of the day. But that's kind of the goal, to not come in with judgment or an already biased view of the situation. So yeah, this algorithmic bias could negatively impact treatment. Finally, this review suggests that the over-reliance or overuse of AI within actual treatment has been associated with higher dropout rates within mental health interventions. And this is just my perspective, but I would assume that if you are talking just to an AI robot or computer program, it would be a lot more difficult to find accountability, emotional connection, and things that are really important for motivation. And something that I really, really like about mental health treatment is that when I go into a clinic for my session, that feels like my safe space. It's separate to where I live, where I work, and the general life that I live, and I get to associate a certain person and a place to be completely focused on my mental health. And that just feels such like a sacred thing, especially when you get to share those really challenging and I guess mind-altering moments with someone, an actual human. It just makes those moments feel so much more special, and I just couldn't imagine if those kinds of moments were simply shared with an AI system. So I could see how AI-driven interventions could lead to higher dropout rates. I just wanted to talk about some considerations about the ethics of AI and mental health and tackle the question, is AI helpful or harmful for mental health treatment? Now, the first thing to consider is therapeutic quality. So, as we said, AI in itself is just a computer program. It has no capacity to read body language, detect when a client, for example, is lying, or pick up on any of those subtle emotional cues that a human practitioner could pick up on. And a lot of the treatment and diagnostic process actually relies on a lot of human skills that AI does not possess. For example, empathy. Empathy is such a big one. What AI is really good at is being affirmative. So you can think about it like it's your yes friend. That one person that is constantly supporting you even if you make the worst decision. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes we might need someone to just agree with us and validate our opinion. But when that validation or that affirmation is constant, it can become like an echo chamber where the responses that we're receiving make us feel like we are always right, or that we understand our situation perfectly. And when it comes to human therapy, we're not talking just about affirmation and validation. That's an important part for sure, but it's also challenging those maladaptive behaviors and maladaptive coping strategies or ways of thinking and behaving. So not everything is going to be great or right or affirmed. And AI has limitations as to how much it can really do that and be a helpful challenger to the things that we prompt it with. And also, you might have noticed, but there's a certain way that AI talks to us. For example, if you're writing an assignment and you put it through a generative AI application, it comes back with a certain style of writing that you can clearly detect is AI. And so beyond that scope, it doesn't really have capacity to communicate effectively, which sometimes for different clients, for different needs, we need to talk and communicate in different ways so that the client actually understands what is happening and what the professional is trying to communicate. Trust is one of the biggest, most important things to have and maintain with a clinician, because how are we supposed to work with someone on treatment and goals when we don't trust them? And sometimes, yes, AI makes us feel like they are our trustworthy friend and all of that, For sure. I think a lot of that is based off how agreeable AI can feel and how supportive it may feel when it is constantly affirming and validating our thoughts and our opinions. But it's not all doom and gloom. I think the underscoring line is that AI tools can be really, really helpful and effective for mental health treatment and enhancing therapeutic qualities when there is human oversight. So a hybrid model of AI use as a tool for assisting human treatment could be a positive way to incorporate AI and technology into mental health. Now, we mentioned this before, but in terms of availability, AI definitely has the upper hand, and its 24/7 accessibility, its financial accessibility, and proximity to us are all things to consider because around the world there is a severe lack of mental health professionals, especially when you look at the amount of people requiring treatment. The ratio of clinician to patient is severe, especially in places like the Philippines, where whilst we're tackling a very big shortage of mental health professionals, we are also tackling things like stigma and a lack of acceptance or discourse around mental health. So something that I have noticed as a point of potential is AI and its accessibility for people, especially in rural, developing, and stigmatized communities. Also, in terms of stigmatization, it's actually such a nice way to reach people within the community in a more discreet way. So something that I've been learning to do is how to converse with people, as I said, whose mental health literacy is quite poor, because when we use big techie language, it can be received with a lot of resistance. Something that I've noticed is that even in these rural communities, most people have phones and are always like scrolling on TikTok or using social media or messaging each other. And I feel like because there's such a high usage of technology already in rural communities, maybe that's something we can tap into as a way to at least advocate and raise awareness around mental health, and also for people to access treatment services without it having to be known to others, especially when they may be faced with stigma within their family, within their community. Now, as I mentioned, finances is such a big barrier, and I have been so thankful that most of my treatment has been subsidized through government healthcare programs and things like that. And also I've participated in community health programs around mental health as well, which have been such high quality, and I'm so grateful to come from a country that really values health in general. At the same time, it's really expensive. So if you don't have those programs and financial assistance in place, it can be really inaccessible. And that, as I said, is the context in Australia. But when I reflect on my time in the Philippines, I know that wages here are really low. And sometimes the amount of money that someone receives as their daily income can be just a single session with a psychologist. And this is just pure observation from interning at the mental health organization. But yeah, it really strikes me how much financial barriers can bring so much strain to people's lives. And most of the time, these people are at a point in their mental health care where it has to be prioritized. And I've heard stories of people selling all of their goods, their jewelry, their furniture, just to get by so that they can receive this treatment. And yeah, it just blows my mind that this is something that people actually have to consider just to receive treatment. So again, AI is a lot more financially accessible, and maybe it is something we can tap into to create programs that can give first points of contact for mental health needs. It's such a scary but exciting time to be at because AI is constantly advancing, technology is advancing, and there are so many potential opportunities for really creative solutions to be developed with the use of technology in mental health treatment. So I'm saying all of this with a lot of hope in mind, along with really considering the ethics and the caveats of using AI in mental health treatment. Okay. One of my last points that I wanted to make was around critical thinking, mindfulness, and agency. So when we reflect on what AI was actually developed to do, it was a lot to do with automating mundane, repetitive tasks, thus enhancing general workflow. In a sense, you could say its function was to enhance productivity. But in healthcare, while there are ways to accelerate treatment and enhance quote-unquote productivity, at the end of the day, recovery and mental health journeys take time. It's also a lifelong thing. And so we can't say, yes, we've reached mental health, full stop, and it's never going to disappear again in our life. And so if we look at it in that sense, the function of AI being a productivity tool doesn't really fit in with the goal of mental health care, which is not really about being more productive. It's just being more effective in treatment care. Something that I personally have used and also have noticed a really big boom in is the use of AI in assisting with projects, especially written outputs. For example, in university, this could be helping develop assignments or cross-checking drafts and things like that. The thing with self-reflection and journaling and other writing practices in mental health care is that you can't really AI it because it has to come from the self, or else it's not really progress or growth. It's just what AI told you to say. And yeah, it really takes a lot of personal reflective effort to conduct these activities, these written tasks. It's not something we can give a prompt to AI to fill out our journal or things like that. And so we just have to be mindful of that fact that the function and the purpose of AI might not map out perfectly onto the values and the goals of mental health treatment. And finally, just a note on ethical considerations. While the use of technology and AI can be a really, really great tool to use, it's also important to think critically about who we are supporting and what kind of organizations are benefiting from the usage of AI within treatment. Because at the end of the day, generative AI doesn't really have a good run with sustainable use of energy. And a lot of these AI programs were developed by businesses in really big tech domains that already have a lot of money and resources and are also quite male dominated. It's important to consider, is that something we want to support by using the products that come from people and places like that? Hopefully there will be more diversity of tools so that we can make more ethical decisions in what kind of AI applications we can use. But for now, the foundations of AI are still those big tech companies. I think for myself personally, I really like to consider where things come from before I use them. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. But this has been such a big conversation, and I just wanted to finish off with a few of my final thoughts and reflect on the whole journey and all the topics that we covered today. So we started off with a deep dive into technology and its use in mental health treatment, the pros and the cons, and then we moved on to what AI definitively was and broke down how these computer programs are being used within mental health treatment, some of the pros and the cons that research has suggested, and then also just some considerations about the ethics, accessibility, situational and personal circumstances which might benefit from more AI use in mental health and vice versa. So thank you for sticking through this whole yap. This is something that I have been thinking about and considering and been wanting to share my thoughts on for such a long time. You do not understand. I have been putting this off for so long because I almost felt responsibility to do this topic justice. I just have to remind myself that AI is always evolving and I can always evolve my opinions and my understanding of this topic as time goes on. So these are just my initial observations as of current. And I think just the key takeaway from this whole conversation is that AI can be an important tool for enhancing mental health treatment, but it is not a replacement for human therapy. I guess we'll see how much that statement holds in the future. Maybe we'll be talking to robots and crying on the shoulders of computer programs in the future. I have no idea. But for now, I really hope that you learnt something new from my big spiel today, and I will continue to advocate for mental health and ethical practice within mental health care as well. And hopefully you will too as well. So thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to the podcast, and also leave a review. It makes a world of a difference. Just a quick update, Ebony and I started a 9-to-5 position, and we have been in full adulting mode, and this passion project has unfortunately been pushed to the side a little bit as we transition into our new roles, but we are doing our best to stay connected, and we really want to connect with more people and bring our conversations to a wider audience. And you can help us do so by sharing this episode with anyone you think might find it interesting. And also you can join the conversation by following us on our socials on Instagram and TikTok at ruok.pods. That is ruocake.pod. And finally, put the bell on Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts so that you get notified about our next episode release, and so that you won't miss our next conversation. Don't forget to check out the show notes where you'll find links to all the resources that were mentioned and referenced in today's episode. And oh my gosh, I think I need to drink some water and go on a hot girl walk because that was a lot. Thank you so much. If you want to join me in my hot girl walk post episode, please feel free to do so. I hope you have a beautiful day or night or evening or wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much again for checking in, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!